The Grand Council chamber of Zilthra gleamed like a massive geode, walls of living crystal pulsing with azure light. Queen Nilara stood before the 7 elders, her luminescent skin dimmed with the shadows of resignation. After 3 centuries of marriage to King Draxel, the whispers had finally become shouts. The queen was barren, unable to produce an heir to continue the royal bloodline. The council has reached its decision, announced Elder Torvax, his ancient voice echoing through the chamber. Queen Nilara's inability to produce an heir threatens our dynasty's continuation. As per the ancient law, the royal marriage is dissolved. Nilara's hands curled into fists at her sides, but her face remained expressionless. She had expected this moment for decades, watching as Draxel grew more distant with each passing cycle of their triple moons. "Do you accept this judgment?" Draxel asked, his voice stripped of the warmth it once held when they were young rulers together. Nilara lifted her chin. "I accept what cannot be changed, my king." The formal title felt like poison on her tongue. "But remember this moment, Draxel. Remember how easily you cast aside centuries of partnership. You cast aside our future with your barrenness," he snapped, breaking royal protocol. A murmur rippled through the assembled council members. "My barrenness?" Nilara's laugh held no humor. "Perhaps you should examine your own bloodline's history of sterility before placing all blame on me." Draxel rose, his crystalline skin flashing dangerously. "You dare." "I dare speak truth, as I always have." Nilara turned to face the council. "I remove myself from this court as is my right. I trust my exile will satisfy your political appetites." She strode from the chamber before anyone could respond, her ceremonial robes sweeping behind her. The guards straightened as she passed, many avoiding her gaze. These same soldiers who had sworn fealty to her now treated her as a stranger. In her private chambers, Nilara moved quickly. She had prepared for this possibility, though the reality felt surreal. She changed from her ornate robes into simple traveling clothes, her shimmering skin now the only mark of her royal heritage. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," she called, knowing who it would be. Her most trusted handmaiden Jessa slipped inside. "My queen." "Not anymore, Jessa. You will always be my queen." Jessa's eyes shone with unshed tears. "The ship is ready as you requested, but please reconsider. Surely there are other options." Nilara shook her head. "Draxel has already chosen his new bride. She's young, fertile, and politically connected. My presence would only complicate matters." She picked up her small travel case. "Besides, I've grown tired of this gilded cage." "Where will you go?" "It's better you don't know." Nilara touched her friend's shoulder. "Thank you for your loyalty, Jessa. May the stars guide your path." Hours later, aboard a small merchant vessel, Nilara watched Zilthra shrink to a glittering point in the darkness. She pulled up the ship's navigation system, searching through restricted archives until she found what she sought, coordinates to a planet that existed only in Zilthrian legends, Earth. The journey took weeks. Nilara used the time to study Earth's languages and customs through the ship's database, though much of the information was centuries old. When she finally entered Earth's atmosphere, the reality of her situation struck her. She was truly alone on a world where her kind existed only in fiction. She landed her ship in a remote area outside what her database identified as Seattle, using the vessel's cloaking technology to hide it from Earth's primitive detection systems. The city's lights glowed on the horizon like a constellation brought to ground. Nilara activated her skin's camouflage ability, a trait all Zilthrians possessed, dulling its metallic sheen to a more human-like appearance. She'd chosen this location carefully, having learned that Earth's coastal cities offered diverse populations where a newcomer might blend in. As she walked through Seattle streets that evening, the sensory assault was overwhelming. Sounds, smells, and sights bombarded her from every direction. Rain began to fall, something she'd never experienced on Zilthra, and she ducked into the nearest building. The sign above read Tidewater Research Institute. Inside, the lighting was soft and blue, reminding her of home in an unexpected way. The building seemed mostly empty at this late hour, but a lone figure stood at the far end of a hallway, studying something in a large tank of water. Nilara approached cautiously, her diplomatic instincts assessing potential danger. The man turned as she neared, surprise evident on his face. "Sorry, I didn't realize anyone else was still here," he said, running a hand through his dark hair. "Are you with the new research team?" Nilara hesitated, remembering her cover story. "I'm new. Just arrived." He extended his hand. "Jackson Reed, Marine Biology Department. You picked a hell of a night to start, everyone else cleared out early because of the storm." Nilara stared at his outstretched hand, then remembered her research on Earth customs. She took his hand gently, and the moment their skin touched, she felt a strange ripple of energy pass through her, something she'd never experienced before. "Nilara," she said, withdrawing her hand quickly. "I was just exploring the facility." Jackson smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, you found the interesting part. Want to see what I'm working on?" Without waiting for her answer, he turned back to the tank. Inside, a small octopus moved gracefully through the water, its tentacles dancing in an intricate pattern. "This little guy is demonstrating problem-solving abilities far beyond what we thought possible for cephalopods," Jackson explained, his voice animated with enthusiasm. "It's changing everything we understood about non-human intelligence." Nilara found herself drawing closer, fascinated both by the creature and by Jackson's evident passion. "Intelligence takes many forms throughout the universe," she said absently. Jackson glanced at her, eyebrow raised. "Throughout the universe? That's an ambitious research scope." His tone was teasing rather than suspicious. Nilara tensed, realizing her mistake. "A manner of speaking," she recovered. "From my perspective, the ocean might as well be another world." "Fair enough." Jackson chuckled. "Though sometimes I think the real aliens aren't in space but right here in our oceans. These creatures evolved in a completely different environment from us, it's no wonder we struggle to understand them." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on Nilara. Here she stood, an actual alien, while he theorized about octopi being the true extraterrestrials. A crash of thunder shook the building, and the lights flickered momentarily. Jackson frowned at the windows, where rain now lashed violently. "That storm's getting serious. Where are you staying? The buses might stop running soon." Nilara hadn't planned this far ahead. Her ship was miles away, and she had no Earth currency for lodging. "I haven't arranged accommodation yet," she admitted. Jackson studied her for a moment. "Look, my apartment is just 2 blocks from here. I have a spare room that the Institute keeps for visiting researchers. You're welcome to use it tonight, and tomorrow we can sort out your proper arrangements." Nilara hesitated. On Zilthra, such an offer from a stranger would be unthinkable, laden with political implications. But here on Earth, was this normal hospitality? "That's very kind," she said carefully. "It's nothing," Jackson replied, already gathering his things. "Besides, no one should be wandering around in this weather. Seattle storms can be deceptively dangerous." As they left the Institute together, Jackson held an umbrella over them both. The simple kindness, protection from the rain without expectation of return, struck Nilara deeply. In the centuries of court politics, she'd forgotten that compassion could exist without agenda. Walking through the storm-lashed streets, Nilara felt something she hadn't experienced in decades: hope. Not the calculated optimism of diplomatic arrangements, but true hope, unpredictable and wild as the earth itself. She glanced at Jackson's profile as they walked, this human who extended shelter to a stranger without question. For the first time since leaving Zilthra, Nilara wondered if exile might not be a punishment, but a beginning. Jackson's apartment was modest but warm, with large windows overlooking the bay. Books lined every available shelf, interspersed with specimens in jars and curious objects collected from beaches around the world. It was nothing like the sterile perfection of Nalara's palace chambers, yet she found it instantly more appealing. "The guest room is through there," Jackson said, pointing down a short hallway. "It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need it." "Thank you," Nalara replied, still uncertain about Earth customs regarding hospitality. "I won't impose on you for long." Jackson smiled, shaking his head slightly. "It's no imposition. Actually, having someone from the international team stay here looks good for my department." He moved to the kitchen. "Are you hungry? I was about to make something." Nalara had studied Earth nutrition during her journey but hadn't yet attempted to consume human food. Her species could process most organic matter, though their preferences tended toward crystalline minerals rich in specific elements. "Yes, thank you," she said, deciding this was an opportunity to adapt further. While Jackson prepared what he called a simple pasta dish, Nalara explored the living room, examining the books and artifacts with genuine curiosity. Her fingers traced the spine of a volume labeled Deep Ocean Mysteries. "You're really interested in the unknown, aren't you?" she observed. Jackson glanced up from chopping vegetables. "Always have been. The ocean is the last great frontier on Earth. We've mapped more of Mars than our own deep seas." He paused, knife hovering over a tomato. "What about you? What brought you into marine research?" Nalara had prepared cover stories during her journey, but standing in this human's home, deception felt wrong. "I'm fascinated by different forms of life. How they adapt to environments unlike their own." "Makes sense," Jackson nodded. "Adaptation is the most remarkable thing about life, isn't it? The capacity to change, to survive in new conditions." His words struck her deeply. Wasn't that exactly what she was attempting now? The meal was simple but delicious, flavors more vibrant than anything on Zilthra. As they ate, Jackson asked about her background, and Nalara wove truth into fiction, speaking of a homeland with crystal formations and rigid hierarchies, describing her resignation from a leadership position. "Sounds like you're running from something," Jackson observed, his perception sharper than she'd anticipated. "Not running," Nalara corrected. "Starting over." Jackson raised his glass. "To new beginnings, then." They clinked glasses, and Nalara felt a strange sensation flow through her, a tingling energy that reminded her of Zilthra's healing springs. She dismissed it as an artifact of emotion. Days passed, and with Jackson's help, Nalara secured a temporary position at the Tidewater Institute, assisting with his research. Her knowledge of biological systems, though based on Zilthrian science, proved surprisingly applicable. Jackson marveled at her insights, attributing them to a fresh perspective. Each day brought new discoveries, not just about Earth's oceans, but about human customs, emotions, and interactions. Jackson became her guide, explaining everything from shopping etiquette to the strange human obsession with coffee. "You drink it like it's sacred," she remarked one morning, watching him perform his ritual with the complex brewing machine. "Morning communion," he replied with a sleepy grin. "Want to try?" The bitter liquid shocked her system, but within moments, Nalara felt a pleasant warmth spreading through her veins. More surprisingly, when their fingers touched as he handed her the mug, that now familiar energy surge returned, stronger this time. "Static electricity," Jackson explained, noticing her startled expression. "It happens a lot in winter." But Nalara knew better. Something about her proximity to Jackson was activating dormant systems in her Zilthrian biology. Each day, she noticed subtle changes, her skin's luminescence becoming harder to suppress, heightened sensory perception, and most alarmingly, the return of abilities she'd thought lost forever. One evening, alone in her room, she extended her hand toward a water glass. Concentrating, she accessed the part of her mind that had once controlled molecular manipulation, a common ability among Zilthrians. To her shock, the water rose in a perfect sphere, hovering above the glass. "What's happening to me?" she whispered, letting the water splash back down. The answer came unexpectedly during her third week on Earth. She and Jackson were collecting samples from tide pools when he slipped on the wet rocks. Without thinking, Nalara reached out, not just with her hand but with her mind. Jackson froze mid-fall, suspended by an invisible force, then gently righted himself. His eyes widened. What just happened?" Nalara stepped back, her camouflage flickering with stress, revealing glimpses of her true luminescent skin. "Jackson, your skin," he whispered, moving closer instead of retreating as she expected. "It's glowing." There was no point in denial. "I'm not what you think I am." "What are you, then?" His voice held curiosity rather than fear. "I'm not from your world." The truth rushed out after weeks of careful deception. "My planet is called Zilphra. I was queen there until they exiled me for being unable to produce an heir." She expected disbelief, even mockery. Instead, Jackson sat down heavily on a boulder, processing her words with surprising calmness. "That explains a lot, actually," he said finally. "The way you ask about basic things sometimes, how you were surprised by rain. I figured you were from some extremely sheltered community, not another planet." He looked up at her. Can I see the real you?" Nalara hesitated, then slowly let her camouflage fade completely. Her skin shimmered with opalescent light, the patterns shifting with her emotions. Her eyes, now their natural violet hue, met his uncertain gaze. "Beautiful," he breathed, and the simple acceptance in that word broke something inside her. They talked for hours on those rocks, the tide coming in around them unnoticed. Nalara explained everything, her marriage to Draxel, the politics of her world, the shame of her barrenness, and her escape to Earth. "But something strange is happening," she concluded. "Being here, with you, it's awakening abilities I thought were lost forever." Jackson's scientific mind immediately began forming hypotheses. Could something in Earth's environment be affecting your biology? Or maybe what? "Maybe it was never you," he said slowly. "Maybe the problem wasn't your biology, but your husband's. Or some incompatibility between you." The thought had occurred to her too, especially as she felt her body strengthening daily on Earth. If that's true, then my entire exile was based on a falsehood. "Would you go back? If you could?" Jackson asked, his voice carefully neutral. Nalara looked out at the ocean, then back at this human who had shown her more kindness in weeks than she'd known in centuries of royal life. "I don't know," she admitted. "Zilphra is all I've known, but there's something about Earth, about the freedom here, that makes me feel more alive." Jackson smiled, reaching out to touch her luminescent hand. The moment their skin connected, a visible spark of energy danced between them, and Nalara gasped as a wave of pleasure and power rushed through her system. "What was that?" Jackson asked, feeling it too. "I don't know," she whispered, "but it's been happening since I met you. Growing stronger each time." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them. The barrier of species and worlds suddenly seemed less significant than the connection forming against all odds. That night, as they walked back to the apartment in silence, both were aware of crossing a threshold. Nalara's secret was revealed, but instead of ending her time on Earth, it had opened a new chapter, one neither of them could have anticipated. In the darkness of her room, Nalara sent a communication pulse to her hidden ship, requesting it to run a complete biological scan on her changing body. The results, when they came, confirmed what she had begun to suspect: her reproductive system, dormant for centuries on Zilphra, was showing signs of reactivation on Earth. She touched the data display with trembling fingers. If the impossible was becoming possible, what did that mean for her future? And what would King Draxel do if he discovered the truth? As if summoned by her thoughts, a warning flashed across her communication device. Long-range sensors had detected a Zilphrian signal entering the solar system. Someone from her world had found her trail. Nilara closed her eyes, her newfound happiness suddenly threatened. She had escaped one cage, found unexpected freedom and connection, and now the past was racing toward her at light speed. The question was no longer whether she would return to Zilphra, but whether she could protect this new world, and the human who was awakening her heart, from the wrath of the king she had left behind.